Hey guys, tonight we going to take you back to one of those moments in history where the air feels thick, the streets are restless, and the entire world seems to be holding its breath without knowing why. You're in Rome, the Rome where marble shines in the daylight. But wood and cloth make up far too much of what actually keeps the place standing. You're walking these ancient streets, sandals scraping along uneven paving stones, the scent of olive oil, sweat, and something uncomfortably close to sewage mixing in the humid summer air. You can hear merchants shouting their final offers of the day, the clink of amphorae being stacked, the slow rumble of a cart returning from the market. And while it all feels alive, it's also, well, dangerously flammable. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you are right now and what time it is for you, so post your location and local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Rome you're standing in is dazzling and dangerous in equal measure. The emperors might brag about marble, but you know most of the city is timber beams, pitch-sealed roofs, and balconies strung with drying laundry like kindling waiting for a spark. Historians still argue whether Augustus actually reduced the number of wooden buildings or just bragged about it. But you can see the truth in the crooked skyline. Rome is beautiful, but Rome is fragile. You pass a row of tenement blocks in Slossic stories, high, swaying ever so slightly, like they're breathing. These aren't the homes of senators. These are crammed with laborers, bakers, and shopkeepers. Each floor has a cooking fire. Some are tended carefully, others not so much. A dropped ember here could turn an entire neighborhood into a pyre. And here's the quirky Partram's fire brigades. The vigils aren't just firefighters. They're also a kind of night watch and amateur police force. Their buckets are leather, their pumps hand-cranked, and their hoses, well, they don't have hoses. You wouldn't want to depend on them in a real emergency. Past the bustling markets, the city's grandeur rises, the forum's colonnades, the temple's marble steps worn smooth by centuries of sandals. You can hear the echo of sandals on stone, the bark of orders from a passing Praetorian guard. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a tune you half recognize, probably one of those songs that will be stuck in your head for days. But Rome isn't just the monumental core. Behind the temples and basilicas, the streets twist into tight alleys, some barely wide enough for two people to pass. They smell like fish, roasting meat, and smoke from a dozen kitchens. You brush past a vendor selling fried dormice, another hawking spiced wine cooled in snow brought down from the Apennines. And in the background, you can feel it heat that hasn't quite let go after the day's sun, clinging to the city like a damp cloak. You find yourself on the edge of the Palatine Hill, looking down at the city as it stretches to the horizon. The rooftops are uneven, like a jumble of discarded tiles, and in between, narrow black slits mark the alleyways. You can imagine how, if something started burning here, it could leap from one roof to the next, faster than anyone could shout for help. It's the kind of thought you try to push away because Rome feels eternal. But you've seen enough to know eternity can be an illusion. As the evening deepens, the marble catches the last glow of the sunset, turning gold and pink. People hurry home or toward taverns, their chatter spilling into the street. Somewhere, someone is arguing loudly over the price of garum fish sauce. A dog trots past with a stolen hunk of bread. And above it all, the scent of wood smoke drifts, nothing unusual in a city where everyone cooks over open flames. But it sticks in your nose just a little too long. There's a strange, restless energy in the air tonight. You can't quite name it. Maybe it's just the press of summer heat, or maybe the way shadows seem sharper than they should be. You notice a shopkeeper closing early, pulling heavy shutters into place and muttering about bad omens. You smile politely, but the words hang in your mind. Bad omens have a way of proving themselves in Rome. By the time you start heading back toward your lodging, the lamps along the main streets are being lit. Their glow is weak, flickering in the slight evening breeze. You watch a boy carrying a torch too close to a cart piled with straw and wince. He doesn't notice. People rarely do until it's too late. The city hums with life, but somewhere in the tangle of alleys and markets, you get the unsettling sense that something small and dangerous is already happening. Something you won't see clearly until it's too late. The sun may have set, but the heat refuses to leave. You can feel it radiating from the stones beneath your feet, seeping through your sandals as if the day has been stored there, waiting for release. The Tiber lies still and sluggish tonight, its surface holding the faint reflection of lanterns from the riverside warehouses. Even the water looks tired. The summer heat in Rome isn't the kind that drifts away with the evening breeze. It's sticky, heavy, almost personal, wrapping itself around you like an unwelcome embrace from that one relative who always smells faintly of anchovies. You wipe the back of your neck, but there's no relief. Your tunic clings stubbornly. You pass a group of men playing dice outside a tavern. They're flushed, laughing too loud, mugs slamming against a rough wooden table. One of them shouts about the luck of the gods, while another swears that Fortuna herself owes him a favor. It's harmless enough, but you notice a thin thread of tension running through their cheer. Like everyone's a little more irritable than they should be. Historians still argue whether summers like this were seen as bad omens or simply bad luck. But in a city built so tightly, heat was never just weather, it was fuel. Down a narrow lane, a baker is still at his oven, sweat rolling down his temples. The smell of fresh bread is so rich, it almost hides the temps of smoke in the air. Almost. You linger for a moment, considering buying a loaf. But the baker barely looks up. His eyes are fixed on the ceiling beams, where the wood is already dry enough to creak. It's one of those small, unspoken things you notice living here. Everyone's aware that heat changes the city, not in ways you see, but in ways you feel. The quirky part, Romans didn't have an official fire season like we think of today. But the vigils, the city's firemen, were known to grumble about certain weeks when they barely get any sleep. You pass a group of them now, leaning against a wall, buckets stacked nearby. They look half bored. One of them catches your eye and offers a smirk, as if to say, "Don't worry, when something burns, we'll be there." You're not sure if that's comforting or ominous. The main streets are still alive with motion. Merchants pack up stalls, shutters slam closed, and the night crowd begins to take over. Couples stroll arm in arm, workers head toward cheap wine shops, and street performers drum on overturned amphorae for coins. You hear the metallic clink of a blacksmith still at his forge sparks, leaping into the night like fireflies that bite. And then there's the wind. It's not strong, just a steady, dry breath moving through the streets, carrying the smell of the day's cooking fires, and the faintest trace of something sharper pitch, maybe. or resin from the shipyards. It teases the torches, makes their flames bow and dance, the kind of wind that, if you were superstitious, you might say was searching for something to feed. A dog starts barking somewhere down by the Subura district. Then another joins in. It's not unusual Rome's strays are half watchdogs, half thieves, but there's something about the rhythm that makes you glance over your shoulder. The streets are darker here, the lamps spaced farther apart, the shadows deeper. Near the corner, you pass an elderly woman with a cart of figs, still trying to sell the last of her fruit. Her voice is hoarse, her face lined from years under the sun. "Too hot to sleep," she mutters, as you drop a coin in her basket. You nod, and she adds, "Heat makes people foolish." It's meant as a general truth, but it sticks in your head like a prophecy. From somewhere behind you, faint music drifts in a flute again, the same tune you heard earlier in the forum. It feels strangely insistent now, threading through the warm air as if following you. You turn down another alley, the stones here slick from a water jar someone's spilled. The wind shifts. For just a heartbeat, it carries a smell that doesn't belong, something harsher, more acrid than the usual smoke from ovens. You stop. Listen, nothing unusual, but the smell lingers, like a warning written in the air. By the time you reach the open square near your lodging, the heat feels even heavier, pressing in from all sides. The crowd has thinned, but the night isn't quiet. Rome never truly sleeps. You hear laughter from a balcony, the cry of a baby in a nearby insula, the thud of a door closing with more force than necessary. Somewhere, the wind slides between buildings and rattles a loose shutter. You tell yourself it's just another summer night. Still, you glance once more toward the horizon, where the sky has taken on a deeper, more restless shade of black. You decide to take the long way back, partly because the night air, for all its heat, still feels freer than the cramped room waiting for you, and partly because you're curious. You turn into one of Rome's narrower arteries, the kind of street that feels less like a road and more like a crack in the city's skin. The stones here are uneven, patched where years of wagon wheels have chewed through them. This is the Rome the poets rarely talk about. It's a place of laundry lines strung so low you duck beneath them, of doorways where children peek out with sticky hands, of whispers you're not meant to hear. The insulae crowd above you, tilting toward each other as if conspiring, their upper stories swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. You can smell olive oil bubbling in a pan somewhere overhead, garlic sizzling, a pot of lentils giving off a soft, earthy steam. It's here that you see the dangers the senators never think about. Every window has a small oil lamp, and more than a few are hung by fraying cords. The wood beams overhead are so dry they seem to sigh with every step you take. Historians still argue whether Rome's housing laws meant to limit the height of these insulae were actually enforced or simply ignored for the right bribe. Judging by the leaning walls, you'd bet on the latter. You pass a carpenter's shop, its shutters open, the smell of fresh-cut cedar spilling out. Inside, a young man planes a beam, the curls of wood piling at his feet. He glances up briefly, then back to his work. The floor is scattered with sawdusts, so much kindling, waiting. Across from him, a brazier glows in a blacksmith's alcove, the heat from the coals seeping into the street. You can feel it against your skin even from here. There's a quirky bit of urban life, you've noticed. Despite the constant risk of fire, Romans adore hanging rugs and fabrics outside their windows to catch the breeze. You pass one such balcony, now colorful cloth swaying just above a torch set into the wall. You wonder if anyone else notices the irony. Farther along, the alleys grow tighter, the shadows sharper. You hear an argument through an open doorway, voices rising and falling, then the unmistakable smash of pottery. A few paces later, a cat darts out, weaving between your legs before disappearing into the night. In the Subura district, life squeezes itself into every possible space. Street vendors fry salted fish in little iron pans. A barber, working under the flicker of a lamp, trims a customer's beard with a knife that has seen better days. You pass a dice table, surrounded by men who glance up only long enough to check whether you are a threat or a distraction. Somewhere above, someone drops a clay jug. It shatters on the stones beside you, splashing you with the dregs of watered wine. A man leans out of the window to shout an apology, though it sounds more like he's annoyed at being interrupted. You wave it off, but your gaze lingers on the jagged edges of the claymore debris for the already cluttered streets. It's easy to see how these conditions could turn a spark into a catastrophe. A torch tips over. A kitchen fire jumps to a curtain. Wind catches it. The alleys act like funnels, channeling the blaze forward faster than the vigils could ever arrive. You imagine the chaos and shake the thought away because right now, Rome is still alive, still humming with the small comforts of evening. Near the corner, you spot a boy chasing a hoop down the lane, laughing until he nearly collides with a cart piled high with amph. The driver curses in Latin so colorful you almost applaud. The boy just grins and runs off. Life goes on here, even under the constant shadow of what could happen. The street opens into a small courtyard where neighbors have gathered to share the last of the day's bread. Someone's passing around a jug of wine, and a lute plucks a slow, mournful tune. You pause at the edge, half tempted to stay. But then a gust of wind snakes through, scattering dust and carrying with it the faintest whiff of something sharp, burnt resin, maybe. You glance down the alley you came from. The shadows seem deeper now, the air thicker. The laughter in the courtyard feels a little too loud, as if masking something else. You shake it off and keep walking, not yet realizing how soon these streets will change forever. The night feels softer now, the way it sometimes does when the noise of the city dips just enough for you to hear your own footsteps. You turn toward your lodging, passing under an archway where a torch sputters against the stone. The light flickers over the wall, throwing shadows that stretch and curl like fingers reaching for you. Rome's rhythm has slowed. The dice players are gone, the bread sellers asleep, and the last shopkeepers are bolting shutters. You breathe in, expecting the air to taste cooler now that darkness has settled. But it doesn't. It's still heavy, still carrying that faint edge of something burnt. Then, as you round a corner near the market of Livia, you notice it. A glow, barely there at first, spilling upward from a street you can't quite see. At first, you tell yourself it eshed just a cook's oven still going, or a tavern lamp shining too brightly. Rome has thousands of small fires every night. It's normal. But the color of this light feels wrong, deeper, hungrier. You keep walking, and the glow grows. The shadows on the walls are shifting faster, as though they're dancing to a rhythm you can't hear. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks again, short, sharp bursts, then silence. You turn down a narrower street toward the source. The heat hits you first. It's not the slow, lingering warmth of the summer day. This is sudden, rising, as if you've stepped too close to an open hearth. The smell follows wood burning, yes, but layered with tar, oil, and something metallic. At the far end of the street, you see it clearly now, the roof of a warehouse, flames licking upward, small at first but leaping higher with each gust of wind. The fire is a strange, beautiful orange against the black sky, flickering across the tiled rooftops like a restless animal testing its chains. Someone shouts. 2 men run past you, one clutching a bucket, the other dragging a child by the hand. Behind them, a woman stands in the doorway of her shop, frozen, her eyes wide as she watches the flames grow. Historians still argue where exactly the fire begins. Some say the Circus Maximus. Others point to the crowded shops near Bibu. But in this moment, all you know is that it's moving fast, too fast. The wind that's been idly wandering the city all evening has found its purpose. It whips through the narrow streets, feeding the blaze, pushing it toward the tangle of homes and markets. A group of vigils rushes in from the main road, leather buckets banging against their sides. You can see in their faces that they know what they're up against. They shout orders, trying to clear the streets, but the residents argue, insisting on saving goods, pets, jars of oil, anything they can carry. And here, the quirky detail. Roman firefighting wasn't just about putting water on flames. Sometimes the fastest way to stop a fire was to pull down the buildings in its path. You watch one vigil drive an axe into a wooden beam, splinters flying, his comrades dragging furniture into the street to make a fire break. But with every crash of wood, sparks leap higher, carried away like tiny messengers to the next rooftop. The heat is building now, pressing against your skin in waves. Smoke drifts low, stinging your eyes and clinging to your throat. Somewhere above, a clay tile bursts with a sharp crack, fragments raining down onto the cobblestones. The woman in the doorway finally moves, vanishing inside to gather whatever she can. More shouting. A mule bolts down the street, dragging an empty cart, its hooves striking sparks. You take a step back, heart hammering, as the fire suddenly surges. One building fully engulfed, then 2. The wind shifts again, and you realize it's not coming toward you anymore. It's spreading sideways, toward the district where the streets are even narrower. You think of the laundry strung over alleys, the oil lamps swaying from frayed cords, the dry wood groaning in the summer heat. You know in your gut that this is only the beginning. The thing about fire in a city like Rome is that it doesn't just grow, it leaps. You stand rooted for a moment, watching as flames that were only moments ago clinging to one rooftop suddenly vault to the next, as if the air itself is eager to carry them forward. It's almost beautiful, the way it moves, hypnotic in its hunger, almost. The warehouse roof collapses inward, with a groan that you feel in your chest more than you hear. A shower of sparks explodes upward, carried high by the warm night wind before scattering across the neighborhood like seeds in a garden you really didn't want to see bloom. One ember lands on a nearby awning. Within seconds, it curls black and bursts into flame. Screams rise over the city, noise sharp at first, then multiplying as more people notice what's happening. Doors slam, shutters fly open, and the streets churn with bodies. Families spill out of the insulae, clutching whatever they can grab in the chaos. Bundles of clothes, jars of grain, household gods pulled hastily from their niches. Historians still argue whether anyone tried to ring alarms or whether word of the fire spread purely through panic. But from where you stand, it's all wordless urgency. A boy sprints past, barefoot, his arms full of scrolls that must have been precious to someone. Behind him, a man shouts to his wife to bring the goat. Yes, the goat. The vigils are in full motion now. Some form a bucket line from a nearby fountain, leather pails sloshing, while others try to tear down a wooden balcony before the flames reach it. The heat makes their faces shine with sweat, but they don't slow. A few residents join in, but most are either too frightened or too determined to save their own possessions. You move with the crowd, drawn toward the wider street in hopes of fresh air, but the fire seems to be moving faster than the people. In the cramped alleys, smoke funnels through like water through a pipe, choking the unlucky ones who linger too long. Somewhere nearby, a dog howls along, mournful sound that cuts through the roar of the flames. The quirky part is how normal some things still look. A man selling figs keeps his stall open, shouting that they'll spoil if he doesn't sell them tonight. Two boys dart in and out of the crowd, not helping but gawking, their eyes wide with excitement instead of fear. For them, this is a spectacle, not yet a disaster. And then the wind changes again. You feel it before you see the effect: cooler air rushing down from the north, colliding with the rising heat from the fire. The flames react instantly, leaning hard into the direction of the gust, jumping gaps that should have stopped them. A clay amphora on a nearby rooftop cracks with the sound of a whip, sending shards tumbling into the street. The first roof collapses entirely. It's not just noise, it's a physical shock, like the city itself is flinching. The crowd surges forward, away from the collapsing structure, and you find yourself swept along, pressed between a man carrying a crate of doves and a woman clutching her child so tightly the child's face is buried in her tunic. You glance back, just in time to see a tongue of fire lash out from the ruined building and catch on the laundry strung across the alley. The cloth flares white-hot for a moment before shrinking into glowing embers that drift down into the press of people. Someone screams, not from injury, but from the sheer terror of knowing how quickly this can get worse, and it will. You can see it already in the way the next row of buildings shimmers with heat, their walls sweating pitch from the joinery, their shutters rattling as if bracing for impact. The fire has stopped being a problem for one street. It's becoming a problem for the city. The street you're on suddenly feels like a river in flood, people streaming in both directions. Some racing toward the fire to find loved ones, others fleeing it with whatever they can carry. The din is constant now. Shouts, the clatter of pottery, the crash of timber giving way, and underneath it all, the deep, unbroken roar of burning. It's not the crackling of a hearth fire anymore. It's a living thing, breathing in and out. You edge along the wall of a shop selling dyed cloth, the air around it thick with the sharp, almost sweet smell of hot pigment. Inside, the merchant and his apprentices are frantically shoving bolts of fabric into baskets. You know enough about dyes to realize that some are flammable, and it crosses your mind briefly that this shop could become a torch in minutes. You turn left toward a main thoroughfare, hoping the wider street will mean safety, but the fire has already found it. In the distance, you see a row of shops with flames licking out from their windows, the wooden shutters curling into black claws. The awnings dry from weeks of sun catch, almost instantly, sagging as they burn before collapsing in showers of ash. Historians still argue whether the fire spread more because of negligence or because the city was simply built to burn. From your vantage point, it's clearly both. The insulae, those tall apartment blocks, are stacked so close together you could almost shake hands across the street. Their wooden balconies jut out like kindling waiting for a match. The lanes twist and narrow unpredictably, making it impossible for the bucket lines to keep pace. You hear the vigils shouting to clear the street ahead. Their plan is to tear down a bakery before the fire reaches its stores of oil and grain. But a group of neighbors resists. They've got food stored inside, and in their panic, they can't see that keeping it means losing everything else. One vigil finally shoves past them with an axe, splintering the bakery door in 2 swings. The crowd scatters, muttering curses. That's when you catch a strange, almost eerie sight. A man standing perfectly still in the chaos, his head tilted back, watching the fire climb a building across the way. His expression isn't fear, it's something else. Awe, maybe, or satisfaction. Before you can make sense of it, he melts into the crowd, gone as if he was never there. The heat ahead is impossible to ignore now. You can feel your tunic sticking to your back. The sweat not just from fear, but from the sheer force of the air pressing against you. The smell has changed again. Tooless wood, more resin, more pitch. Somewhere in there is the faint temps of metal melting. A quirky detail about Rome in this time. Many houses stored small amphorae of lamp oil, sometimes dozens, to get through the long nights. Right now, you can hear those amphorae bursting in quick succession inside a nearby building, each pop followed by a sudden flare in the flames. It's like the fire is being fed courses in a feast, and it's eating greedily. Someone grabs your arm, an old woman with wild white hair, pulling you toward a side street. "The river," she shouts, though her voice is nearly lost in the noise. "Go to the river." You nod, letting her guide you for a few steps before she releases you to help a small boy who stumbled. You keep moving in that direction, hoping she's right. The side street is quieter, but only for a moment. The sound of collapse follows you, a heavy, final thud that makes the ground tremble underfoot. You glance back and see a whole section of roof folding inward, a plume of sparks marking its fall. The crowd ahead stumbles at the shockwave, then regains its momentum. The Tiber isn't far. Now you can smell its dampness under the layers of smoke. But the closer you get, the clearer it becomes that you're not the only one with this idea. The embankment is crowded, people standing in clusters, clutching their salvaged belongings, watching the skyline glow like a forge. Children cry, their faces streaked with soot. Some people have stripped down to their tunics and are wading in up to their waists, as though the cool water might erase what they've just seen. Across the river, you can see the orange shimmer reflected on the dark water, the silhouettes of rooftops sharp against the light, and even here, the ash falser, soft, gray snow that settles on your shoulders and in your hair. You brush it off and realize your hands are trembling. Somewhere to your right, a man is muttering that this is no accident, that someone set the fire on purpose. You've heard whispers like that before, about rivals burning warehouses to ruin each other, or angry tenants torching their landlord's property. But this feels bigger. You look back at the city and see the flames stretching farther than they should in just one night, reaching for places you thought were safe. You can't help but wonder, in the pit of your stomach, if he's right. The gust comes without warning, like some invisible giant leaning down to blow across the city. One moment, the fire is a sprawling chaos, scattered pockets across the skyline. The next, it's moving as though it's decided exactly where it wants to go, and fast. You feel the push of the wind against your face, carrying with it a blast of heat that makes you instinctively lean back. The air smells sharper now, tinged with burned resin and singed hair. It's not pleasant, but it's the kind of smell you'll never forget. You remember hearing once that Rome's summers often brought strong evening winds off the sea, funneling through the city's narrow streets. Historians still argue whether those gusts were the main accelerant that night, or whether the city's design was the true culprit. From where you stand, both seem guilty ones, the match, the others the pile of dry leaves. From the embankment, you can see the fire leap literally, leap from one insula to another across an alley, as if its decided gravity is a suggestion. Sparks ride the wind high into the night, landing on rooftops blocks away. Some smolder quietly before catching, sending up little orange flags that quickly grow into fresh towers of flame. Someone shouts for the vigils, but you can barely see them in the smoke. The bucket lines that seemed hopeful a half hour ago are collapsing into chaos. Men drop their buckets to grab children. Women abandon their places to pull carts of belongings out of the street. The wind keeps shifting, sending thick, choking smoke sideways into the crowd, forcing people to cough and shield their faces with scraps of cloth. A young boy runs past you, holding a clay lamp, probably the only thing he could save from home. He trips, and the lamp smashes on the stones. The oil spreads and catches instantly from a stray ember, and the tiny spill turns into a momentary flare. It's absurd and terrifying how easy it is for this fire to find food. You start moving back toward the main streets, but every turn seems worse than the last. One alley is blocked by a burning cart, its wheels still turning slowly from when it was abandoned. Another is crowded with people frozen in indecision, staring up at a burning roof, as though willing it to hold just a little longer. Somewhere above the din, you hear the eerie groan of wood and stone straining against itself. Then, a collapse of full building giving way. The sound is deep and final, like a drum beat from the earth itself. The shockwave stirs the wind again, tossing more embers into the air. It's almost like the fire is breathing deeper each time a structure falls. Here, a quirky detail you once read in some forgotten scroll. Romans sometimes hung wet laundry across alleys to keep dust down in the summer. Tonight, in more than one place, those dangling sheets have become accidental firewalls catching sparks, flaring briefly, and then burning away before the flames reach the next building. It's a fragile defense, and you can see how easily the wind defeats it. The Palatine Hill is visible through the shifting curtains of smoke, its silhouette sharp under the orange glow. You notice the fire climbing toward it almost like it's being pulled uphill. That's the wind's doing, too hot air rising, drawing the flames upward. People near you are murmuring about the Emperor's palace, some with awe, others with a kind of dark satisfaction. If the seat of power burns, maybe the rest of them won't feel so alone in their loss. The wind changes direction again, suddenly pushing the fire toward the Circus Maximus. The crowd seems to sense it all at once, a ripple of dread running through the mass of people. That's a lot of open ground, you think, but also a lot of wooden seating, oil-soaked timbers, and dry cloth awnings. The thought alone makes your skin prickle. You pass a group of men dock workers, by the look of them forming a rough barricade with carts and barrels. Their plan, if you can call it that, is to keep the flames from reaching a storehouse full of grain. One of them calls out for help, and you almost stop, but another gust of wind sends a plume of sparks directly over their heads. The grain might be safe for now, but you won't be if you linger. Everywhere you look, the fire behaves less like a force of nature and more like a cunning predator choosing its next move. The wind is its accomplice, darting down narrow lanes to fan small blazes into full infernos, then swirling upward to feed the larger ones. You watch it carry a strip of burning cloth high into the air, where it twists and spins like some grotesque festival streamer before vanishing into the haze. The noise is relentless. The flames roar, the wind howls, timbers crack like breaking bones. Above it all, you can hear the rising chorus of human voices pleading, cursing, praying. The mixture is dizzying. You catch snippets of Latin prayers beside frantic bargaining, promises to the gods in exchange for a spared home, a saved child. When you finally find a momentary refuge in the lee of a stone wall, you can feel your heartbeat thudding in your ears. The wind here is calmer, the air marginally cooler. You take a breath, but even that feels heavy, the smoke coating your throat. You watch the fire dance in the distance and know it's not slowing down. Somewhere out there, beyond your sight, the wind is deciding the fire's next victim, and you have the uneasy sense it might already have chosen. The heat feels heavier now, like the city itself is exhaling straight into your face. You push forward, weaving through the crowd, only to be swept along by a current of people moving in the same direction away from the Circus Maximus. You can see why, even from here, the massive arena is a glowing outline in the smoke, its curved edges haloed in orange. The crowd murmurs the name again and again, as though saying Circus Maximus out loud will either curse it or save it. The wind has carried sparks onto its awnings, and a few small fires lick upward, testing the timbers like someone testing the edge of a knife. The Circus Maximus isn't just a racetrack, it's Rome's showpiece, the heartbeat of its public life. You remember reading that it could hold more than 150,000 people at once. That's more than most towns in the empire have in total. Its long, central strip, the Spina, is lined with statues and obelisks, many older than Rome itself. Some were plundered from Egypt centuries before, their stone faces watching races with the same bored expression they wore while staring across the Nile. Tonight, their watch is over a different contest: fire versus timber, speed versus time. Historians still argue whether the circus burned entirely or just in sections that night. From where you're standing, sections sounds optimistic. The first flames skitter along the seating like sprinters on the opening lap, chasing each other in and out of the wind's shadow. The rows of wood, dried to brittle perfection by years of sun, catch like they've been waiting for this moment. People scream for water, for soldiers, for the vigils. But the vigils are already spread so thin they may as well be shadows. You spot a few near one entrance, axes in hand, hacking away at supports in the desperate hope that a controlled collapse will stop the fire's advance. It's a gamble, and one they might not have time to finish. You duck into a side street to get a closer view, though closer might be the wrong word when the air itself feels like it could peel your skin. The wind shifts again, drawing the fire deeper into the structure. The awnings collapse in a sudden whoosh, flaring brighter before sinking into the black skeleton of the stands. Here's a quirky little detail. The spina of the Circus Maximus was dotted with lap counters, giant eggs, and dolphins that turned to mark each completed lap in the races. One of those massive wooden dolphins is now ablaze, its curved body glowing like a molten fish leaping eternally from an invisible sea. It's strangely beautiful, the kind of image you'd never want to admit finding beautiful. You think about the races, the roar of the crowd, the colors of the faction, banners, reds, blues, greens, white siege, one whipping in the wind like a sail. Tonight, the colors are gone, replaced by a uniform blackness, the banners either burned away or trampled in the panic. The crowd around you shifts as people start hauling whatever they can from nearby stalls, food, cloth, even bits of metal, anything they can carry before the flames claim it. Some are merchants saving stock, others are simply scavengers, already thinking about what might fetch a price in the days ahead. The fire has a way of blurring the line between desperation and opportunity. You can't help but notice the palace above the Palatine Hill is still untouched, looming like a dark, silent witness to the chaos. The wind, however, is steering the fire uphill now, pulling heat and flame toward those marble and gold walls. Whispers ripple through the crowd. If the circus falls and the fire reaches the palace, maybe the gods themselves are making a statement. A sudden crash interrupts your thoughts. One of the main entrances to the circus gives way, its charred timbers snapping like matchsticks. The fire leaps through the new opening, rolling across the ground in a wave of orange and gold. The wind pushes it deeper into the arena's belly, feeding it like a bellows stoking a forge. You back away fast, nearly tripping over a fallen signpost. The street here is a tangle of overturned carts, abandoned goods, and people running in every direction except toward the fire. One man shouts that the circus is lost and everyone should head toward the forum. Another insists that the forum will be next. Neither sounds entirely wrong. The heat is so intense now that you feel it on the backs of your hands, even though you're not touching anything. It's the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer, bending light like water. Somewhere above, a shower of sparks rains down from the upper tiers, the wind spreading them into the surrounding streets. You watch as two separate fires ignite almost simultaneously, one in a row of shops, the other in a storehouse. It's like the city is lighting itself piece by piece. You retreat again, this time toward the river, hoping the air will be cooler there. But even the Tiber looks wrong, its surface reflecting the firelight in a broken, restless pattern. A group of men are trying to soak blankets in the river to use as shields. But the heat evaporates the water almost as soon as they pull them out. The soundscape has shifted to where earlier the fire roared like a crowd. Now it's more like a constant, deafening applause, clapping for its own destruction of the city's heart. The people's voices have gone hoarse, the shouts blending into a low, desperate hum. Somewhere in the distance, you think you hear the deep blare of a horn, maybe a signal from the palace, maybe just someone trying to rally the remaining firefighters. The fire doesn't care. It's already decided the Circus Maximus belongs to it. You turn for one last look before the smoke swallows your view. The arena's outline is nearly gone, replaced by a jagged crown of flame. That wooden dolphin on the spina finally collapses, breaking apart into a dozen flaming fragments that scatter like fireflies before winking out in the smoke. It's hard to imagine the circus filled with cheering again after this. Tonight, the only race worth watching is the one between the fire and the rest of the city, and so far, the fire is winning by several laps. You try to keep moving, but the streets are starting to blur together. Every turn feels like you're retracing steps, only to find the buildings ahead in worse shape than the ones behind. Somewhere in that smoky maze, the rumor starts to catch on. The fire isn't random. At first, you think it's just paranoia, the way people under pressure start looking for patterns that aren't there. But the whispers sharpen as they pass from mouth to mouth. They saw men with torches, someone says. Buckets of pitch, says another. They were told to burn the shops. Nobody can agree on who they are. Some say soldiers, others swear it's gangs working for powerful men, and a few mutter the Emperor's name like it's a curse. They afraid we'll hear them back. Historians still argue whether arsonists really moved through Rome that night. Some sources insist they did, carrying out a plan to widen the destruction. Others think it was the natural spread of the flames, pushed along by the wind and the city's own flammable bones. From your vantage point here, with the heat radiating in waves and smoke closing in from both ends of the street, the idea of natural feels laughable. Nothing about this feels like an accident anymore. You catch sight of them before you hear them, not of figures moving with a strange calm, not in the panicked jerks of the fleeing crowd. They're walking in a line, each carrying something in their hands. You duck into the shadow of a doorway, just as one of them passes close enough for you to see the smear of soot across his face and the glint of a clay jar. The sharp, bitter tang that hits your nose tells you what's inside. Pitch. They stop at a row of shuttered shops, exchange a few quiet words, then without hesitation begin smashing the jars against the walls. The liquid spreads dark and glossy for a moment before catching a wandering spark. And suddenly the whole row bursts to life, the flames climbing eagerly like ivy in a garden from hell. The people nearby howl in disbelief. Some charge forward to try to stop them, but one of the arsonists pulls a blade and the attackers scatter. The line of fire is already spreading, skipping from shop to shop like it's rehearsed. You realize with a sick feeling that this isn't just burning the city, it's cutting off escape routes. The arsonists disappear into the smoke as quickly as they came. Behind them, the street you might have taken toward the Forum is now a roaring wall of orange. You're forced into a narrow alley, the kind that smells of damp stone and old fish, where every sound echoes too loud. The smoke funnels down here, turning the air into something you can almost chew. You pass two men arguing. One swears he saw palace guards setting fire in another district. The other says it was slaves under orders from high up. A woman clutching a bundle of rags insists she overheard someone say Nero wanted a blank canvas for rebuilding. You can tell if she's telling the truth or just repeating something she wishes were true, because blaming someone makes the fear easier to swallow. There's a fringe rumor too, the kind that even in your current state you recognize as pure theater. Someone claims they saw musicians on the Palatine Hill playing flutes and lyres while the city burned. The storyteller swears it was for the emperor's great song. It's ridiculous, but in the heat and chaos, ridiculous feels possible. The alley spits you out into a broader street, and you almost collide with a column of vigils. Their faces are black with soot, their tunics soaked dark, carrying buckets and axes. They push past you toward the glow, barking orders at each other in clipped Latin. You hear one of them curse about men undoing all our work before they vanish into the smoke. Even they've heard the rumors. Somewhere ahead, the air shifts and cools, just slightly a hint of the river. You hurry toward it, thinking you can use the Tiber as a guide. But the moment you reach the embankment, you see why others are avoiding it. The warehouses along the shore are burning, and the fire's reflection dances on the water like molten coins dropped into a black well. A group of boys are hauling amphorae out of one warehouse, their bare feet slapping the stones. One slips and drops his load. It shatters, spilling not water but oil, which slithers toward the edge of the quay. When it hits the flames, the fire surges forward, climbing the oily sheen across the river's surface. The boys scatter, the oil fire chasing them with a hiss. You double back, realizing that the city's entire lower quarter might become inaccessible soon. That uneasy sense of control that maybe you could pick a safe path is gone. You're just moving where the fire allows you. Through another side street, you see an old man standing in front of his bakery, holding a peel like a weapon. He shouts at a pair of younger men you can't quite see, his voice cracking with rage. "I know what you're doing. Get out before I..." A sudden burst of light cuts him off. The doorway of his shop flares, and he stumbles back, batting at the fire with the peel until the heat forces him away. He catches sight of you, eyes wide, and yells something about Nero's orders. You don't stop to ask him for proof, you just keep moving, because the smoke behind you is getting thicker, and your lungs are already protesting. By the time you reach higher ground, the city below looks less like streets and more like a river of fire, its currents splitting and rejoining at random. Somewhere in that chaos are the arsonists, real or imagined, moving like shadows through the glow, deciding which way the flames will go next. The air up here is a little clearer, but you can still taste the bitterness. A reminder that even distance can't erase what's happening below. The people huddled here talk in low voices, trading stories about who started the blaze, who's profiting from it, and who will be blamed when the smoke clears. You listen, but you don't add your voice to the mix. Tonight, the truth feels like just another thing the fire might consume. From this higher perch, you think maybe you've bought yourself a little breathing room. The fires below writhe like living things, leaping from roof to roof. But here on the hilltop, the wind only carries the smell and the distant crackle. You can almost convince yourself it's far away till a sound cuts through the chaos. Music. It's faint at first, a thin thread weaving through the shouts and the roar of burning timber. You tilt your head and catch the rhythm-plucked strings, maybe a cithara paired with the airy whistle of flutes. Your first thought is that it's someone playing to drown out the disaster, the way people sing to keep from crying. But then you follow the sound with your eyes and realize it's drifting from the Palatine Hill, where the imperial palace sits like a crown. A small crowd has gathered at the crest, some pointing, others shaking their heads. One man swears on his life that Nero himself is up there, standing on a balcony, playing and singing of the fall of Troy. You squint through the smoky haze, trying to make out a figure in the torchlight, but the distance and flicker make it impossible. Historians still argue whether Nero truly performed during the fire, or whether this image was crafted later to turn him into a villain. All you know right now is that the sound is real, and its timing feels almost staged. The man next to you mutters, "He's got a good view from up there." His tone isn't complimentary. Another woman says she heard that Nero iced tea even in Rome, that he is miles away at his villa in Antium. The contradictions pile up until they're as thick as the smoke. It's not just the music that has people buzzing. Word has started to spread that the emperor is planning something big, something new to replace what's burning. The phrases "golden palace" and "private gardens" keep cropping up, spoken with equal parts awe and bitterness. You can almost hear the unspoken part. If the emperor wanted to clear land for a grand project, this fire is doing a suspiciously good job. You find yourself walking toward the Palatine, not because you think you'll find answers, but because it's one of the few areas that still seems to have some structure left. The closer you get, the more you notice the difference. Streets here are being cleared, not abandoned. Slaves haul buckets from decorative fountains, dumping water over roofs. Guards keep the crowd moving along, steering people away from certain gates with firm hands on shoulders. You spot a young boy tugging at his mother's sleeve, pointing up at the palace walls. His eyes are widened with fear but wonder. "It's beautiful," he says, watching the flames paint the marble in gold and red. His mother pulls him along, not answering. "A merchant you pass," says he, "is heard of wagons carrying furniture and statues into the palace, even while the city burns moving treasures in, not out." It's a strange image, and you can tell whether it's proof of arrogance or simply the emperor protecting his own wealth. Then, almost without warning, the music stops. The silence feels heavier than the sound ever did, and in its place you hear another noise chanting. A group of people is moving up the road toward the hill, holding small bundles of herbs and bowls of wine. They stop at intervals to pour offerings onto the ground, muttering prayers to Vulcan, the god of fire, begging him to turn his destructive gaze elsewhere. One of them notices you watching and presses a sprig of laurel into your hand. "For protection," she says. It smells sharp and clean, cutting through the smoke for a moment. You tuck it into your belt because, honestly, at this point, you'll take all the protection you can get, even if it's just symbolic. Somewhere to your left, an argument breaks out, two men shoving each other, each convinced the other has stolen from him in the confusion. A guard intervenes, separating them with the butt of his spear, and one of the men storms off toward the burning quarter. You wonder how many fights like that are happening all over the city tonight, fueled by desperation, mistrust, and the kind of heat that turns tempers into kindling. The sky is shifting now, streaked with red and orange, as the moon rises through the haze. The fire hasn't stopped, but it's no longer one single blaze, it's broken into patches, each one feeding on a different part of the city. You can see the jagged edges where buildings have already collapsed into glowing piles. A group of vigils passes again, their voices low but urgent. One says the wind is turning, which could drive the flames back uphill toward the richer districts. The idea that this hill, with all its marble and order, could end up looking like the chaos below makes your stomach turn. You decide to move higher still, toward a vantage point where you might see both the palace and the river. As you climb, the music starts again, fainter now, and you realize it's coming from deeper within the palace grounds. Whether it's Nero himself or just a musician hired to soften the horror? You can't tell. But it's a strange, almost surreal counterpoint to the destruction below, like the city has split into two realities, one of performance and one of survival. By the time you stop to rest, you're leaning against a cool stone wall, the laurel still tucked in your belt. The fire continues its slow, relentless reshaping of Rome. And you can't shake the thought that somewhere, someone is already planning what will rise from the ashes. Whether that's the emperor or just the next opportunist waiting for his chance. That's a question for another night. You press away from the Palatine's shadow, your legs carrying you downhill, again not toward the burning districts, but toward the ribbon of silver you've been catching glimpses of through gaps in the smoke. The Tiber. Tonight, it's more than just a river. It's a lifeline. Word in the streets is that open space along the banks has become a gathering point, a place where the fire can't chase you so easily. The road you follow bends sharply, and you begin to feel the slope in your calves. The wind, coming off the water, is cooler here, though it still carries the ash and the bitter temps of burnt pitch. You're not alone far from it. All around you, people are flowing in the same direction. Families clutching baskets, men hauling goats on ropes, a pair of women carrying an entire mattress between them. You pass a man with soot all over his face who is cradling something against his chest. At first, you think it's a baby, but when he shifts his grip, you see the carved head of a small household god, one of the Lares, protectors of home. His lips move in a silent prayer as he walks. It's oddly comforting to see someone treating a figurine with the same tenderness most reserved for a child. As you draw closer to the river, the crowd thickens. There's a sound rising up, now not the panicked cries you've been hearing all night, but the dull roar of hundreds of voices blending into one constant hum. When you finally break through the last line of buildings, the Tiber lies before you, wide and dark under the smoke-blurred stars. Its surface reflects the orange light from the city, rippling it into strange shapes. People are everywhere, sitting on the embankments, lying in the sparse grass, clustered around makeshift fires, built from whatever wood they could grab on the way. Some are washing soot from their faces and arms, splashing the water on like a baptism. Others have taken to wading in waist-deep, their children clinging to their backs, as if the river itself is a fortress wall. One older man is using a fishing net as a hammock strung between two willow trees. You have no idea how he got it to hold, but he's rocking slowly in it, eyes half closed, humming to himself. Not all survival looks like running and shouting. Sometimes it's just finding a way to sway gently while the world burns. You find a spot near the water where the stones are still warm from the day's sun. The cool river air brushes your skin, bringing with it a fleeting moment of calm. It's easy to imagine that you could just stay here until morning, letting the city's nightmare play itself out somewhere behind you. But then you notice something bright flecks drifting downstream. They're not leaves, they're embers. The fire might not be able to cross the river, but its breath reaches even here. You overhear a pair of vigils arguing nearby. One insists the worst of the fire has already passed. The other says the wind could change at any moment and sweep the flames toward the remaining intact districts. Historians still argue whether the Tiber acted as a true barrier that night, or whether spot fires leaped across to consume neighborhoods on the far bank. Looking at those drifting embers, you can see how both stories might be true. Somewhere down the embankment, a group of boys is daring each other to swim to the opposite shore. A woman with a voice like a temple bell calls them back, warning that the current is stronger than it looks tonight. You watch as they grumble but obey, trudging back through the shallows with their tunics clinging to their knees. You think of the city above, of the alleys you've walked and the faces you've passed. How many of them are here now, scattered along the water? How many never made it out? And how many, like the man with the household god, are clutching some piece of their life that will make the next part whatever that is feel less empty? Across the river, the silhouettes of buildings are etched in orange, their outlines flickering as roofs collapse in slow, graceful arcs. The sound reaches you a moment later, low, heavy thud, like a drumbeat in the bones of the earth. Someone near you mutters that it's the Circus Maximus coming down, though you can't be sure from this distance. Still, the thought of that vast wooden Arena Rome-esque playground for chariot races and festivals succumbing to the flames makes your chest ache in a way the heat never could. You stretch your legs toward the water and let the cool dampness seep into your sandals. For the first time tonight, you realize you're thirsty. Kneeling, you cup the water in your hands and drink. It's got that river tasterthy, with just a hint of the city in it, but right now it's better than anything poured from a goblet in a marble hall. A small dog trots past you, carrying something in its mouth that glints faintly in the firelight. Its owner, a boy of no more than 12, calls after it, laughing in spite of everything. You follow their path with your eyes until they vanish into the crowd, swallowed by the soft shadows cast by the willows. The river isn't quiet, but compared to the streets, it feels almost like a lullaby, water against stone, murmured conversations, the occasional splash. You let yourself listen, really listen, until the fire's roar is just another note in the background. Tomorrow, maybe the survivors here will turn this place into a camp. Maybe they'll move on or go back to rebuild. But tonight, the Tiber is a refuge, and you are just another soul sheltering on its banks, breathing air that's only half smoke. You wake, if you ever truly slept, to a strange quiet, not silence. The constant shrieks and stampedes of the night before have faded into something lower, heavier. You turn toward the city, and through the smoky haze you see not just flames, but blackened skeletons of buildings still standing in eerie defiance. And among them gaps, empty spaces where something sacred once was. Word is already spreading along the riverside. Temples are gone. Not just little neighborhood shrines, but great, time-worn sanctuaries that had stood longer than most families have been in Rome. You make your way back toward the streets, moving with others who can't quite resist the urge to see what remains. Your sandals crunch over charred debris. The air is different, now less blistering heat, more the smolder of dying embers. Somewhere ahead, a column lies across the street, still steaming, and just beyond it, you come upon the site where the temple of Jupiter Stator once stood. What remains looks like a mouth with its teeth knocked out, a few upright columns, a scorched altar, and an empty square where offerings once gleamed in gold leaf. A group of older women stands before it, murmuring prayers. One reaches down to pick up a lump of blackened bronze, a melted remnant of a votive statue. She cradles it in her palms, whispering as if to reassure it. It's not grief over mere objects, it's grief over a pact with the divine, suddenly broken. Farther on, you pass the Temple of Lunaor, at least the ashy footprint of it, Historians still argue whether this particular sanctuary fell early in the fire or later in the final hours. But here, there's no mistaking the loss. The marble floor is cracked from the heat, and the moon goddess's image is nothing more than a faint outline in soot on the inner wall. You find yourself staring at it longer than you mean to, tracing the phantom curve of her bow. Not all the devastation is solemn. At one intersection, a group of men is digging through a pile of scorched rubble with the determination of treasure hunters. They re not looking for coins those would have melted in the blaze, but for anything salvageable from a nearby spice shop. A sudden shout goes up when one man uncovers an intact jar, sealed tight. He opens it and inhales deeply before passing it around. Cinnamon, the aroma bursts through the smoke, so rich and out of place that it makes you laugh under your breath. Even here, in ruin, someone finds something that smells like life, but most of what you see is ash on ash. Sacred treasures, silver bowls used in rituals, embroidered cloths for altars, scrolls of prophecy are gone. These weren't just decoration. They were part of the city's heartbeat. You remember, uncomfortably, that Rome believed the favor of the gods kept the empire standing. And when you look at these broken altars and empty pedestals, you can't help but wonder if some citizens see this as a sign. A man beside you mutters about the Sibylline books, the ancient prophecies guarded in the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, where they saved, burned, hidden. He shakes his head before you can ask. No one will say, he adds, his voice flat. It's one of those rumors that will travel for generations. The truth buried somewhere between fear and secrecy. You turn a corner and stop short. Here, the ground is littered with shattered marble heads from statues, their features warped by heat. A goddess with no nose. A hero whose jaw has sagged into something grotesque. They look like fallen soldiers after a long siege, except these fought no battle in, lest you count the relentless advance of fire as an enemy army. The smell changes again as you near the site of the Temple of Vesta, keeper of Rome's eternal flame. The building's roof has caved in, and the sacred fire is gone extinguished, not by ceremony, but by chaos. For centuries, the Vestal virgins tended that flame without fail. Now, its absence feels like a hollow in your chest. You're not the only one who thinks so. Two Vestals, their white robes gray with soot, stand stiffly at the edge of the ruins. One's hands are clenched so tightly around a bundle of unburned kindling that her knuckles are white. You don't speak to them. Some moments are too heavy for words, but you file the image away, knowing you'll never forget the sight of those priestesses staring at an altar gone cold. Nearby, a charred fig tree smolders, its leaves curled into black fists. You remember hearing that the fig tree was sacred to Mars, the god of war, because of the legend of Romulus and Remus. Seeing it burned feels like another little blow to Rome's mythology, as if the city's own origin story has been singed. And yet, there are odd pockets of survival. In one courtyard, a small fountain still runs, its trickle of water cutting a clean path through the ash that has settled on the marble basin. A sparrow lands on its edge, dipping its beak into the cool water. You stand there longer than you mean to, watching this tiny act of defiance against the destruction. Everywhere you go, people pick through ruins, some in mourning, others in calculation. Not everyone is here to grieve. Some are looking for opportunities. A wealthy-looking man in a purple-edged toga walks past, flanked by two scribes, pointing at properties as if he's already considering which ones to acquire. It's a jarring reminder that even in the ashes of temples, business moves forward. By the time you reach the end of the street, the smoke has thickened again, and you feel the heat licking at your back from fresh flare-ups somewhere nearby. The fire may have spared parts of the city, but it's not done claiming its share. You quicken your pace, leaving behind the shattered sanctuaries and the people who can't stop staring at them. The gods have lost their houses, and Rome has lost a piece of itself, but the night still holds more to burn. The streets you take now are narrower, darker, and even more unsettling than the open ruins you just left behind. Here, the fire has done something different. It hasn't obliterated everything so much as warped it. The walls still stand in places, but they're twisted. Their surfaces bubbled from the heat, like bread dough that rose and then collapsed. You keep one hand out, steadying yourself against the blackened stone, feeling its warmth pulse faintly through your palm. You hear footsteps ahead and quicken yours, turning a corner into what used to be a little market square. Now it's a patchwork of still-burning stalls and collapsed beams. The smell here is harsher scorched fabric, burnt oil, the faint tang of copper from something metallic gone molten. You spot a merchant poking through what remains of his shop, his movements jerky and desperate. He's a spice seller, or at least he was. His jars, like the one of cinnamon you saw earlier, have cracked under the heat. Fine powders have spilled into the ash, staining it crimson, saffron, deep gold. It would almost be beautiful if you didn't know those colors were the final remnants of someone's livelihood. He looks up when he notices you, his eyes wide and wet. Without a word, he scoops up a handful of charred coriander and lets it sift through his fingers. You can tell he's not saving it, he's saying goodbye to it. Around the corner, the devastation gets stranger. The fire has melted the lead from the aqueduct pipes above, and it's dripped down in silvery trails over walls and cobblestones. You crouch to touch one cool now, hard and smooth, like some kind of frozen river. Historians still argue whether the lead poisoning in Rome was ever truly a public health disaster. But right now, it looks like the city itself has bled metal into its wounds. And then there's the marble. You pass a row of statues along a colonnade, their surfaces cracked and whitened from the heat. One figure a senator, judging by the folds of his toga, has split clean in two down the middle. His severed halves lean against each other, as if still conferring in secret. You can't help but smirk at the idea of political debate frozen mid-argument. In the center of the next block, the fire has claimed a public bathhouse. You step through what used to be its arched entryway into a space now unrecognizable. The mosaic floors are mostly intact though, and the tiles are slick under your sandals from the water that burst out of the steam room cistern. It's strange to see the blue and gold patterns, dolphins, seashells, curling waves surrounded by soot. A young boy crouches near the tepidarium pool, dipping his hand into the water as if expecting it to still be warm. It is. Above you, the roof is gone, leaving the baths open to the smoky sky. This space once echoed with gossip, laughter, business deals whispered over the splash of water. Now it esped just the drip-drip of a broken pipe and the occasional pop from burning timber outside. You find yourself lowering your voice instinctively, as though the ghosts of bathers past might overhear. Leaving the bathhouse, you push into a residential lane. Here, the fire has turned entire homes inside out. A bed frame lies half in the street, its charred wood still giving off little puffs of smoke. Inside one doorway, you glimpse a kitchen blackened pots, a cracked oven, the faint outline of a loaf of bread baked hard as a brick mid-rise. When the firestorm swept through, you imagine someone kneading dough just hours before the blaze reached them, unaware they were making their last meal in that kitchen. Further along, you pass what was clearly a wealthier house. A mosaic floor survives here too, though the walls above it have fallen. The design shows a lion chasing a gazelle frozen forever in a hunt that can't be finished. You step over the lion's paw, wondering if the family that once owned this place had the chance to escape. You spot something small in the rubble, a child's bronze toy soldier, its surface blackened but its tiny sword still raised. You leave it where it is. In one courtyard, you find a bizarre scene. A marble dining table still set with dishes. The plates are cracked, the food reduced to black lumps, but the arrangement is strangely neat, as if the diners simply vanished. A neighbor explains in a low voice that when the fire came, the family ran so fast they didn't even push back their chairs. She laughs softly, but it's not humor, it's disbelief. Not all that's left behind is mundane. Near the edge of this neighborhood, you notice a small shrine built into a wall. The fire has licked it, but the painted image of the household gods, the lares, remains mostly intact. Their little faces, serene and faintly smiling, peer out from a background of ash. You touch the frame before moving on, unsure whether you're paying respect or just taking comfort in something that endured. And then you reach the street that leads downhill toward the river. Here the fire's damage is patchy, one building gutted entirely, the next only singed. It's unsettling, like the destruction was choosing favorites. You pass a bakery with half its facade standing, the other half open to the sky. Inside, the ovens have collapsed, but one stone shelf still holds a line of burnt loaves. You break one open out of curiosity. The crust crumbles into ash in your hand. By the time you reach the end of the street, the light is shifting, again less from flames now, more from the weak sun filtering through the smoke. You can feel the city trying to breathe under all this ruin. The smell has changed too. It's less about burning wood now and more about damp ash, like a campfire long after it's gone out. Still, here and there, a wall will give a sudden crack and fall, or a beam will flare back to life, reminding you that the fire is never as gone as you think. You keep moving toward the river, wondering how much of Rome still stands untouched and how much is just waiting to fall into the same silence you've been walking through all morning. You follow the lane until the ground starts to slope more sharply, the air growing cooler with each step. The smoke thins just enough for you to spot a shimmer ahead, the Tiber, glinting in what little sunlight can sneak past the haze. It's a relief to see something still moving naturally, water curling and foaming against its banks, as though the city's chaos can't touch it. But the riverbanks themselves tell a different story. Down by the docks, barges lie half sunken, their hulls scorched. Some are still tethered loosely to posts, their ropes charred but not quite burned through. Men wade in knee-deep water, pushing debris away from the moorings, while others haul up crates that look more like lumps of charcoal than goods. The fire has chewed through cargo meant to feed and supply the city, grain, olive oil, amphorae of wine, all gone. You hear one sailor mutter that even the rats abandoned ship before the flames reached the quay. As you draw closer, you notice people taking to the water, not for escape, but for salvage. A boy dives near a tipped-over boat and comes up clutching something shiny, a bronze lamp. His mother shouts at him to drop it, warning it might carry bad luck, but he hugs it to his chest anyway. You can't help thinking he might be right to keep it. In times like this, even superstition feels like insurance. Further along, you pass the wharf, where fishmongers used to shout their prices from dawn until midday. Now, the air is thick with a different smell-burned wood mixed with something sour. You spot baskets of fish tipped over into the water, scales glinting like coins just beneath the surface. A stray dog wades in to snatch one, carrying it to the shade of a collapsed shed to eat. Near the largest warehouse, you find something unexpected. Its stone walls have mostly withstood the fire, but the wooden doors are gone. Inside you see rows of stacked amphorae that survived, not many, but enough to make the dockworkers' faces light up. They roll the jars carefully out onto carts. A man grins at you as he hoists one, declaring this shipment was bound for Ostia. But now it's Rome's lucky day. You decide not to point out that the rest of the city might not feel so lucky right now. Historians still argue whether the fire's spread was worsened by the close-packed warehouses along this stretch of the river. The logic is their goods, stored in bulk, can fuel flames like nothing else but walking through the wreckage. You realize it's not just about fuel. It's about the sheer chaos of trying to save both lives and livelihoods at once. Here, you see merchants arguing with soldiers, each insisting the other should help with salvage. At the far end of the quay, where the river bends, you notice something odd. A cluster of boats has been deliberately set adrift. Their sails are scorched, but not entirely burned, and they're drifting slowly downstream. A man explains they were pushed off to keep the fire from jumping to the other bank, better to lose a boat than an entire district. You watch them float away, their hulls creaking, until they vanish into the gray. You decide to cross one of the bridges, the Pons Emilius. The stone structure has survived, though its surface is scattered with charred planks, remnants of stalls that once lined the approach. From the middle of the span, you look down at the water, carrying bits of Rome away, scorched timber here, a child's sandal there. The river feels like an unintentional archive, gathering the fragments that once made up the city's life. On the far side, you enter Transtiberum, the district across the water. Its less damaged here patches of normal life survive. You pass a baker selling fresh loaves from a brick oven that somehow escaped the fire. The smell is intoxicating after hours of smoke. You buy one, still warm, and break it open. The crust crackles and steam curls into the cool air. For a moment, the chaos feels far away. But even here, the fire's reach is visible. Families from the burned districts crowd the streets, clutching bundles of clothes or dragging carts piled with whatever they saved. A woman sits on a doorstep, cradling a jar of honey like it's worth more than gold. Children run between the carts, their laughter tinged with the wild energy of people who don't yet understand the scale of what's been lost. At the edge of a small square, a makeshift aid station has formed. Jugs of water, baskets of bread, and a few amphorae of wine are arranged under a striped awning. The awning sags under the weight of ash. You help pass cups of water to a group of older men, their faces soot-streaked. One tells you he hasn't had a drink since last night. He'd been too busy trying to keep his mule calm while they evacuated. You wonder if the mule made it Past the square, you find a quieter street lined with villas. Here, the owners stand outside, some offering space to displaced families, others looking uneasy about strangers on their doorstep. You hear whispers about the emperor. Some say he's already planning to rebuild. Others mutter about his role in letting the fire spread. You file that away. It's a thought that's going to keep surfacing. As you turn back toward the bridge, the late afternoon sun catches the river just right, turning the surface molten gold. It's almost beautiful, if you can forget that much of what's floating in it is ash from people's homes. You pause, leaning on the bridge's stone railing, letting the cool breeze off the water wash the heat from your skin. You've seen the fire's fury in the heart of the city, but here by the river, you can feel its reach in a different way. It's not just about destruction, it's about movement. People, goods, rumors, and even fragments of the city itself are flowing out, scattering downstream. The Tiber is carrying the memory of this night far beyond Rome, into places that will never smell the smoke, but will still hear the stories. By the time you climb back into the heart of the city, the light is turning. Strange late-day sun, filtered through smoke, makes everything bronze and shadow, like you've stepped into a faded fresco. The streets you follow tilt uphill toward the Capitoline Hill, that stubborn lump of rock that's been the city's high ground for centuries. It's smaller than you imagined, no towering fortress, just a steep rise crowned with temples and government buildings. But in the middle of a burning city, it feels like a citadel. As you wind upward, you pass groups of citizens hauling belongings toward the hilltop. It's not just valuables. They've brought cages of doves, rolls of wool, even a barrel of pickled fish. You spot one man balancing a bust of some philosopher on his shoulder, grunting with each step. A neighbor shouts after him, "You never even read his work," but he just keeps climbing. People cling to what they think will anchor them when the world shifts, and sometimes that anchor is a face carved in marble. Halfway up, you hit the first defensive line, soldiers in segmented armor, shields resting against their thighs. They're letting people through, but scanning faces carefully. You hear a name shouted, and a young man is pulled aside. His protests fade as he's led away. Historians still argue whether these hilltop checkpoints were more about keeping criminals out or keeping scapegoats in. Either way, you feel every pair of eyes tracking you as you pass. At the top, the air is slightly clearer. The wind pulls the smoke sideways, revealing glimpses of the city below. From here, you see the fire's jagged edges, patches of unburned buildings surrounded by char, like islands in a blackened sea. Down near the Forum, roofs are collapsing inward, sending up new bursts of embers. To the west, smoke curls from the Circus Maximus like steam from a boiling pot. You turn toward the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, its columns still gleaming despite the ash. The steps are crowded with people priests in white robes streaked gray, senators whispering behind hands, mothers with children huddled under cloaks. A group of Vestal virgins passes, their veils drawn low, heading toward the altar with a small bronze chest. You remember hearing that the chest holds sacred relics that must never fall into enemy hands. The fire might not be an enemy in the military sense, but here it's treated with the same urgency. Behind the temple, a council is forming. Senators, military officers, and envoys stand in a loose circle, speaking in urgent bursts. You drift closer, pretending to admire the view, catching fragments. rebuilding fund, grain shortage, public order. The word Nero floats past more than once, followed by tight-lipped glances. You realize you rehearing the earliest seeds of the political storm that will follow the physical one. Near the Capitoline archives, a team is hauling scrolls out of storage. They're careful, moving in pairs, wrapping the papyrus in linen. A scribe tells you they reprioritizing legal and land records, the kind of documents that keep disputes from erupting into violence later. You nod, thinking how strange it is to see this blend of panic and bureaucracy. Even when the city burns, paperwork survives. A small shrine catches your attention. Its painted plaster is cracked, but the offerings are intact. A bowl of grain, a small clay figurine, a sprig of laurel. An old woman kneels before it, murmuring prayers to whichever god still seems likely to listen. You notice a coin glinting at the base, freshly placed, not melted. She must have brought it all the way here, past fire and soldiers, just to leave it. The Capitoline Hill isn't all solemnity, though. At one edge of the summit, a group of youths has gathered, leaning over the railing to watch the city like it's a theater performance. One nudges the other and says, "That building's going next," pointing toward a warehouse whose roof is smoking. They're wrong. The wind shifts, and the fire skips past it, but the mood is a reminder that not everyone sees disaster the same way. Walking along the ridge, you find the Tarpeian Rock, a sheer drop once used for executing traitors. Now, it's just another vantage point. From here, the city's destruction feels almost abstract, blocks reduced to smudges of gray and red. Streets like faint lines on a map. You imagine a future historian standing here, sketching the fire's path, turning today's heat and chaos into something cool and ordered. On the northern slope, people are pitching makeshift shelters, cloths stretched between stakes, blankets tied to trees. Children dart between them, carrying jars of water or armfuls of bread. A man with a lyre strums softly, the notes threading through the murmur of conversation. You pause, listening. Music feels almost indecent in a moment like this. But maybe that S, the pointed S, an assertion that life will keep leaking back into the cracks, no matter how wide the fire tries to pry them open. As the sun dips lower, the hilltop glows in a light that makes the stone seem almost warm to the touch. The temples cast long shadows across the open spaces, stretching toward the city as though trying to shield it. You sit on a low wall, letting your legs dangle, and watch the smoke drift in lazy curls. Now that the wind has calmed, somewhere below, a roof gives way with a sound like a sigh. From up here, you see both the fragility and the stubbornness of Rome. The fire has hollowed streets, swallowed homes, and yet in this hill people are already setting aside space for scrolls, relics, and whispered strategy. You get the sense that if the whole city turned to ash, someone here would still be making lists about what to do next. And maybe that's why Rome keeps surviving what should destroy it. By the time you descend from the Capitoline Hill, the city feels even stranger than before. It's not just the fire, it's the sense that the streets are now layered, one on top of another, as if each moment since the blaze began has left its own ghost version of Rome hovering in the air. You step over cracked tiles, still radiating heat, past a stall where the figs have shriveled in their baskets, their sweetness now sticky smoke in the air. You follow a winding route toward the Campus Martis, the flat expanse northwest of the main hills. Once, this was where the legions drilled, their shields flashing in neat ranks, but tonight it's more like a refugee camp. The wide fields are crowded with tents, some made of fine linen from wealthy households, others nothing more than patched cloaks stretched between spears. The hum of voices is constant, punctuated by the occasional wail of a child or the sharp bray of a tethered mule. You wander past small clusters of people cooking over smoky fires. One group has skewers of something vaguely bird-shaped turning above the flames. Another is boiling grain in a dented bronze pot, the porridge bubbling up in thick, lazy bursts. A woman offers you a cup of watered wine. It's warm and a little sour, but it softens the rasp of ash in your throat. She tells you her home in the Subura is gone, and she doesn't know if her neighbors made it out. She says it in the flat tone of someone who's repeated the fact so many times it's turned into just another line in the day's events. At the edge of the field, near the riverbank, you find groups huddled around wagons piled high with belongings. Some wagons are neatly stacked with crates and amphorae. Others are just chaotic heaps of furniture, tools, and unidentifiable odds and ends. You spot a saddle hanging from a corner, embroidered with faded horse patterns. Someone dragged that through half the city for reasons only they understand. There's music here, too. A pair of traveling performers has set up a makeshift stage, a plank laid across two barrels. One plays the flute, while the other juggles 3 clay cups, each one chipped but miraculously intact. The crowd's laughter is softer than usual, the kind people use when they're trying not to think too hard about tomorrow. Not far from the stage, a group of men are deep in heated debate. You pick up complaints about the cost of grain, arguments over whether the emperor will compensate those who've lost homes. One man claims Nero has already promised aid. Another insists that's a rumor spread by his supporters. Historians still argue whether the emperor truly acted swiftly to help, or whether the relief came slower, tangled in the bureaucracy that always seems to rise in times of crisis. The river itself is busy. Boats are moored close together, some being loaded with goods to be taken upstream, away from the city. You notice that a few are already being used as floating homes, families sprawled on decks under makeshift awnings, fishing lines trailing into the Tiber. The water glints dully under the smoke-muted sky, carrying both the scent of mud and a faint Thames of burned timber washed down from the banks. Toward the northern end of the field, a group of priests in deep crimson robes performs a quiet ritual. They're sprinkling water on the ground from laurel branches, murmuring prayers to ward off disease. You remember the warnings. When the air is thick with ash and people are crowded together, illness can follow faster than fire. A young boy runs past them, tripping over his own feet and sending one of the laurel branches tumbling. The priest retrieves it with a small sigh, the kind that says he's seen worse interruptions. You pause near a low cart selling flatbread. The vendor, a wiry man with a patched tunic, tears off a piece for you. On the house, he says, adding with a smirk, bread's cheaper than rebuilding. It's dry and plain, but the warmth of it settles your stomach. Around you, the sound of chewing, talking, and quiet bargaining feels oddly comforting, a reminder that people are still doing normal things. Even with half the city in ruin, not all the camp is calm. Near the far fence, 2 men are shouting at each other, both gripping the handles of a battered chest. You hear the words mine and liar more than once. A small crowd gathers, half curious, half ready to intervene. An older woman steps forward, plants herself between them, and says something in a voice so firm it cuts through the noise. The men slowly loosen their grip, muttering under their breath. The chest is set down in the dust. No one opens it. As dusk deepens, lamps and torches begin to glow across the field. The flickering light makes the camp look like a scattered constellation, the stars brought down to earth for a night. You sit on the edge of a cart and watch shadows move between the points of light, families settling down, guards changing shifts, a child chasing the flicker of a torch like it's a firefly. The air cools slightly, though the smoke still hangs in your lungs. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, twice, then falls silent. The sound is swallowed by the soft murmur of hundreds of voices, the rustle of fabric in the breeze, and the faint creak of wagon wheels as someone shifts position in their sleep. You realize the city might still be burning, but here, for the moment, life has shaped itself into a small, stubborn version of order. And as you lie back, using your folded cloak as a pillow, you can almost forget that tomorrow the wind could change, and the fire's edge could be here before the bread cools. Almost. You wake to the faintest light, not the gold of sunrise, but the washed-out gray of a sky still choked with smoke. Your throat feels dry, your eyes gritty, and the air smells faintly of wet ashes. If somewhere in the night, rain tried to fall and gave up halfway. Around you, the camp stirs slowly. A man nearby stretches his arms overhead with a groan, while a woman shakes out a wool blanket, sending up a cloud of dust that makes you cough. You decide to head toward the Aventon Hill from the Campus Martis. It's a trek south, through streets that are both familiar and unrecognizable. You pass the hulking outline of a public bathhouse, its tiled roof caved in, the scent of scorched cedar from the collapsed beams mixing with the Thames of charred olive oil. Someone has already set up a makeshift stall in front of the ruins, selling small clay lamps scavenged from the debris. The merchant catches your eye and shrugs. "If I don't sell them," he says, "the next guy will." The Aventine has always been a district of contrast temples alongside crowded tenements, wealthy villas beside noisy taverns, but today it feels hollowed out. Many of the taverns are shuttered, their signs hanging crooked, paint blistered from heat. At one corner, you see a small shrine to Mercury, its offerings scattered. A charred loaf of bread lies next to a melted bronze coin, both fused to the stone by the fire's heat. You follow a lane that climbs toward the top of the hill, where the air is marginally clearer. From here, you can see the fire's scar in jagged swaths across the city. Roofs are gone entirely in some districts, leaving walls like broken teeth. Other places still smolder, thin streams of smoke curling upward as if reluctant to leave. You can almost trace the fire's path, the way it jumped streets, skipped buildings, and doubled back on itself in that strange, unpredictable way flames travel in a tightly packed city. Historians still argue whether it spread so wildly by accident or by design, whether the emperor's rumored building plans had anything to do with the destruction. At the crest of the hill, you find the Temple of Diana, remarkably intact. Its white columns are streaked with soot, but the structure stands firm, as if the goddess herself warded off the flames. Inside, the cool marble floor feels almost shocking under your sandals after days of hot stone. A priestess in a pale tunic moves quietly between altars, sprinkling water and murmuring prayers. You drop a small coin in the offering bowl, not because you think it will undo the fire, but because it feels wrong to stand in a place of calm without giving something back. From here, you take a narrow path down toward the river again, skirting neighborhoods where residents are already rebuilding. You pass two men hauling bricks in baskets, their arms dusted white like bakers. A boy squats beside them, chipping at a lump of mortar with a small hammer, probably salvaging it for reuse. You overhear one of the men joke that soon the Aventine will be all fresh and fancy, like the Palatine. His friend snorts. Or maybe just fancier ashes next time. Near the base of the hill, you encounter something unexpected. A small market in full swing. Traders have set up stalls with goods brought in from outside the city: figs from Campania, pottery from Etruria, even a basket of bright green olives. The contrast between these fresh, almost luxurious goods and the blackened ruins a street away is jarring. You buy a handful of dates, sticky and sweet, and feel the sugar hit your system like sunlight after a storm. You hear music again, this time from a lyre, the strings plucked with a slow, calming rhythm. The musician, an older man with deep lines in his face, sits on a low stool, his feet planted firmly in the dust. He sings in a voice that carries just enough to reach the edge of the market. The words about cities falling and rising again, about how walls burn but roads remember. It's the kind of performance that makes you stand still without meaning to. Just beyond the market, you come across a scene that makes you pause. A group of children is playing a game with a charred roof tile, tossing it back and forth like a ball. Their laughter rings out, bright and unbothered, and for a moment you forget the blackened walls, the acrid air. The tile catches the light as it spins, its edges jagged, but its center smooth from years of weather before the fire ever touched it. A little farther along, you find yourself at the edge of a row of warehouses. One door hangs open, revealing piles of amphorae, some intact, others split open with their contents, spilled grain hardened into strange lumps. Olive oil congealed into amber-like puddles. A rat scurries across your path, its fur singed in patches, vanishing into the shadows. By late afternoon, you make your way to a ridge that offers one of the best remaining views of the Circus Maximus. The vast racing track is eerily empty, its wooden stands blackened and warped. This was where the fire first began. If the earliest reports are to be believed, though whether it started in a shop selling flammable goods or in a storage space beneath the stands remains one of those details lost in the smoke of history. From here, you can still see the outline of the track, the curve where chariots once leaned hard into the turn. Now it's just silence, save for the wind stirring ash into faint spirals. The sun begins to dip, its light filtered through the haze into something soft and reddish, like diluted wine. You start back toward the camp, your sandals stirring fine soot with every step. Rome feels different, now not just damaged, but shifted, as if the fire has pulled back a curtain and shown you the fragile frame beneath the marble and brick. The thought sits with you, steady and unsettling, as you descend toward the tents and the scattered constellation of lamps waiting to be lit again. Night slips in almost unnoticed, the smoke in the sky turning from gray to a deep, inky blue that hides the stars. The camp is already stirring with the low hum of evening routines, pots clinking, quiet conversation, and the faint smell of lentil stew simmering somewhere nearby. You find yourself restless, not quite ready to settle under the rough wool blanket yet. Instead, you drift toward the river, letting the soft sound of water over stone guide you. At the banks, the Tiber glimmers faintly in the lamplight from a cluster of barges. Traders are unloading supplies, barrels of wine, bundles of grain, amphorae that clink gently as they're stacked. The fire may have eaten the heart of Rome, but the city still needs feeding, and the river remains its lifeline. You lean on the railing of a small wooden pier, the boards cool under your hands. Somewhere downstream, you can hear laughter, group of boys daring each other to wade into the dark water. You wander a priver, past a row of temporary kitchens set up by a guild of bakers. They've taken to working outdoors, their regular ovens destroyed, and the scent of fresh bread drifts toward you in soft waves. You pause to watch one man expertly shape loaves on a makeshift table, his fingers moving fast and sure, sprinkling flour like snow over the surface. He catches your eye and grins. "We bake, Rome lives," he says, as if it's a simple equation. Maybe it is. Just beyond the bakers, you hear the clink of tools. Following the sound, you come across a small group of carpenters working under torchlight, repairing a section of walkway along the bank. The boards are fresh-cut pine, their pale surfaces almost glowing in the lamplight. The men work in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging murmured words about measurements and angles. One young apprentice is humming under his breath, a tune you can't place but that feels oddly soothing. Historians still argue whether reconstruction in these first days was organized by the emperor or sprung up in pockets, like this neighbors and guilds taking matters into their own calloused hands. As you turn back toward camp, your path takes you through a neighborhood where the fire's destruction is oddly uneven. One house stands untouched, its shutters closed, its walls clean, while the ones on either side are hollowed shells. You stop to study it, wondering if it was saved by luck, by quick-thinking neighbors, or by something else entirely. The door creaks open, and an older woman peers out, holding a small oil lamp. She nods politely, says nothing, and shuts the door again. The light inside disappears, leaving the street in shadow. You're halfway back when you catch a flicker of movement in a side alley. Curiosity tugs at you, and you follow it to find a street performer, yes, even now standing in front of a cracked wall. He's juggling 3 blackened roof tiles, his motions smooth and precise despite the uneven weight. A small crowd has gathered, children clapping softly, a couple of soldiers watching with faint smiles. The performer throws in a wink between tosses, and for a moment the air feels lighter, like someone has cracked open a window in a smoky room. Heading toward the camp, you pass a wine seller's cart parked beside a broken fountain. The cart is stocked with clay cups and a large, sealed jug of something red and sweet-smelling. The seller waves you over, offering a sip on the house. Since the house is gone, you take the cup, the wine warming you instantly, cutting the taste of ash in your mouth. By the time you return to the tents, the sky has shifted again, the blue deepening to a velvet black. The camp is brighter than before, dozens of lamps lit, their flames bobbing gently in the night breeze. People sit in small circles, sharing food, telling stories, and occasionally breaking into soft bursts of laughter. You settle near one of the fires, the heat a welcome contrast to the cool river air clinging to your clothes. Someone passes you a slice of bread, still warm from the baker's ovens. You break it in half, steam curling into the air, and the smell alone feels like a reminder that even in the shadow of ruin, something good can be made. You eat slowly, watching the flames dance and listening to the quiet blend of voices around you. Roman Latin, accented Greek, the sing-song lilt of traders from the east. The night wears on, and you catch yourself yawning. Across the fire, a man is telling a story about a goat that supposedly survived the fire by hiding in an abandoned cistern, living on scraps tossed down by passersby. You're not sure whether to believe him, but you like the image of a stubborn goat outlasting the flames. Finally, you stretch out on your blanket, the earth firm beneath you, the night air cool and heavy with the scent of damp ash. The camp has quieted, the crackle of the fire the loudest sound now. You close your eyes, thinking of the bakers, the carpenters, the juggler with his roof tiles, all the small, stubborn signs that the city, in its own way, is already learning how to breathe again. Morning finds you with the faint taste of ash still clinging to your tongue, but the air feels different, lighter, cooler. The dawn light spills over the Tiber in soft ripples, turning the surface into liquid bronze. You sit up, stretching stiff muscles, and notice that the camp has already begun to stir. Merchants are unpacking crates. Children chase each other between tent poles. Someone is frying onions, the smell drifting warmly through the morning haze. You wander uphill toward the Palatine, past streets where the debris has been cleared into neat piles, as if Rome is tidying herself before company arrives. But as you crest the slope, the view stops you cold. There, across a wide swath of cleared land, something entirely new is taking shape, a massive framework of scaffolding. Dozens of workers hauling timber and marble, overseen by foremen shouting orders in rhythmic bursts. This is not a temple, not a market, not a civic forum. This is something different. The word passes through the crowd like a spark. Domus Aurea, the golden house, Nero's palace. You stand at the edge of what will one day be its gardens, still only rough outlines scratched into the soil. Even in this raw stage, the ambition is obvious. Water channels already being dug for fountains, open courtyards sketched out in chalk lines, giant pits prepared for stone foundations. Historians still argue whether Nero had planned this before the fire or seized the opportunity after it. Some claim the layout suggests long-term vision, not a sudden whim. Others say the fire's destruction simply gave him the canvas he craved. Either way, the design is unlike anything Rome has seen. A passing stonemason offers you a glimpse at the plan scraps of parchment weighted with a chunk of marble. You catch glimpses of intricate mosaics, a massive circular dining hall that will supposedly rotate with the sun, and an artificial lake fed by hidden aqueducts. It's part palace, part dreamscape, and entirely a statement of power. You can't help but think of the contrast below. Camps of displaced citizens still sleep under patchwork tents. Here, the emperor's future home rises in glittering concept. A worker nearby jokes that it'll be so big you could fit 100 bakeries inside. He laughs, but the sound has a bitter edge. As you circle the site, you notice something unusual, a cluster of exotic animals penned near the edge of the works. Peacocks strut in the dust. A pair of gazelles nibble on dry grass. A foreman explains, almost proudly, that Nero intends for the gardens to hold not only fountains and flowers, but living wonders from across the empire. It's meant to impress visiting dignitaries, but also, you suspect, to make Romans forget what once stood here. A memory tugs at Nero streets and timbered houses, gone now without a trace, replaced by this sprawling vision. You step carefully around the edge of a chalked circle, wondering whose home once sat where you now stand. The midday sun sharpens the sense of fresh-cut pine and wet mortar. You hear a musician somewhere among the workers, a reed flute trilling a melody. It's oddly soothing in the chaos, a reminder that life keeps threading itself through the cracks. You buy a cup of watered wine from a vendor who has set up beside the site. Construction workers drink a lot, he says with a grin, and so do the gawkers. You're not offended to be counted among the latter. Moving toward the northern edge, you spot a newly erected archway marking the future main entrance. Even unadorned, its proportions are grand enough to make you crane your neck. A pair of sculptors are at work there, chiseling details into large stone panels. One of them pauses to wipe sweat from his brow and mutters something about working faster than the fire spread, which earns a chuckle from his partner. By late afternoon, you've made nearly a full circuit of the grounds. From this vantage, high above the rest of the city, you can see where reconstruction struggles forward in fits and starts some neighborhoods alive with hammering and voices, others still silent, blackened husks. Downriver smoke still curls faintly from a collapsed warehouse. The Golden House site, by contrast, hums with coordinated energy. Slaves, artisans, engineers, they move like parts of a machine, whether driven by ambition, fear, or the promise of imperial favor. They seem determined to raise this vision from the ashes as quickly as possible. A sudden breeze lifts the dust, and you turn away, blinking. In that moment, you catch sight of a child sitting alone on a pile of rubble just beyond the boundary. She's holding a cracked clay doll, watching the workers with a gaze that is both curious and utterly unamused. You realize she might have lived here once, before the fire. Her quiet presence feels like a reminder that even the grandest projects are built atop someone else's loss. As evening settles, torches flicker to life across the site. You start the slow walk back toward camp, glancing over your shoulder at the skeletal frame of what will become Nero's golden playground. Against the deepening blue of the sky, it already gleams faintly in the torchlight, as though claiming its name before the first gilded tile is laid. You wonder, as you descend into the streets, how many will marvel at its beauty, and how many will curse its memory. The next morning, Rome hums in a way you haven't felt since before the fire. It's not the easy hum of a city at peace, but the restless vibration of too many voices, too many rumors, all trying to find a single truth. You wake to it like waking to the sound of Beeslow, insistent, impossible to ignore. The Forum is the obvious place to go. If anything is going to bubble up into public knowledge, it will spill over there first. As you make your way down the marble steps toward the heart of the city, you pass vendors calling out prices for figs, dates, and the first autumn grapes. A man selling wax tablets claims they re-perfect for recording eyewitness accounts before the emperor writes the story for you. He winks when he says it, but it's the kind of wink that feels like a dare. By the time you reach the Forum's open expanse, clusters of people are already gathered under the shade of portals. Some are gesturing wildly, others leaning in close to share something too dangerous for open air. You drift toward one of the larger groups, catching phrases as they spill between speakers. They say it was his men who lit it, wanted space for that palace. No, no, it started in the warehouses, you fool. Historians still argue whether Nero ordered the fire, whether it was accidental, or whether it was sparked by the gods themselves, the divine punishment for Rome's arrogance. Here in the Forum, all three theories coexist, weaving into each other like the smoke that once twisted over the rooftops. You overhear a former soldier insisting he saw imperial guards carrying oil jars into certain neighborhoods the night before the blaze. Just steps away, a grain merchant swears the fire started in his own district's market stalls, ignited by a careless lamp knocked over in the crush of late-night customers. A pair of matrons declare it's all irrelevant. What matters is that the rebuilding favors the rich, not the ones who lost everything. And then there's the stranger story, a young man claiming the Christians are to blame. You've heard whispers of this sect before, followers of a crucified prophet from Judea, worshipping a single god and refusing to honor Rome's deities. Their numbers are small, but their devotion makes them noticeable. According to this man, Nero himself suspects them, or perhaps has already decided they make the perfect scapegoat. You decide to check the basilica steps, where the loudest speakers usually plant themselves. Sure enough, a man with a voice like gravel is proclaiming that the fire was fated, foretold by omens, the collapse of an eagle's nest from the Capitol roof, the sudden stillness of the Tiber before dawn, a comet blazing briefly in the night sky. He insists this was all recorded by the augurs, though whether that's true or just a convenient memory is anyone's guess. At a stall selling honeyed almonds, you chat with the vendor, a wiry woman with a scar across her cheek. The truth, she says, lowering her voice. The truth is a coin. You flip it enough times, and someone will buy whichever side it lands on. You pop one of her almonds into your mouth, sweet, sticky, and surprisingly grounding. By midday, the Forum grows more crowded. A herald arrives with an official announcement, scroll in hand. The crowd hushes mostly. He reads a message that Nero has pledged even greater resources for rebuilding, promising that Rome will rise more magnificent than before. There's no mention of the fire's cause, no naming of the guilty, just the steady drumbeat of imperial generosity. It's clever, you realize, by flooding the streets with marble, fountains, and new roads, Nero can overwrite the memory of the fire with a gleaming present. Yet in the Forum, the murmurs begin again the moment the herald leaves. You hear the word Christiani more often now, rolling through conversations like a stone dropped into a pond. Some say they admitted to it under questioning. Others claim the admissions were forced. The details shift with each retelling, but the tone is clear. A new narrative is settling into place. You slip away from the main square, taking the long colonnaded street toward the Subura. The alleys here are narrower, the walls still streaked with smoke. This is where rumors move faster than official proclamations. A group of children dart past you, playing some street game involving stones and chalk marks on the ground. Their laughter feels almost defiant. In a shaded corner, two men are arguing over whether Nero's rumored singing during the fire actually happened. One insists he saw the emperor on a balcony, lyre in hand, while flames licked at the horizon. The other calls it nonsense. Nero wasn't even in Rome when it started. You reminded of how slippery memory can be when people need their stories to fit what they already believe. By late afternoon, the sun slants low, and the heat finally eases. You wander back toward the forum, the marble now glowing honey gold in the light. The crowds have thinned, but a few knots of people remain, their voices softer now, conspiratorial. You catch a final snippet, someone swearing that the Emperor has a list, and on it are names of those who will soon be arrested for crimes against the city. The air feels thicker as you leave. You can tell if it's just the dust or the weight of too many half-truths hanging above the streets. One thing is clear. In Rome, the fire may be out, but the heat hasn't gone anywhere. The next days pass with the kind of tension you can almost taste, like the faint metallic temps of blood after biting your lip. You find yourself walking through streets where people keep glancing over their shoulders, mid-sentence, lowering their voices, not because there's anyone nearby, but because the habit feels safer. It starts with whispers, a few quiet arrests, men in plain tunics hauling someone from their home before dawn. But soon it's impossible not to notice. By midday, you see carts rolling toward the Praetorian barracks, each carrying 2 or 3 bound figures. The crowd watches, mostly in silence. A few spit, a few make the sign of protection against evil. Word spreads fast, too fast to be purely organic. Nero has named the Christians as the culprits behind the fire. Historians still argue whether he truly believed this or simply saw them as a convenient answer. In this moment, though, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is that the official story has been planted, and the city is watering it with fear. You remember your first encounter with them, quiet, earnest gatherings in borrowed courtyards, voices murmuring hymns about love and forgiveness in a city that thrives on power and spectacle. Their refusal to worship the Roman gods has always been risky. Now it's a death sentence. You slip into one of their meetings, hidden in the back of a wine shop. The owner pretends to be scrubbing amphorae in the front room, while, in the cellar, a dozen people sit on rough benches. A young woman reads from a worn scroll in Greek, her voice steady even as she stumbles over certain phrases. You notice the others listening with a stillness you've only seen in the aftermath of great loss. It's not the stillness of resignation. It's the stillness of choosing to remain even when you know what is coming. When the meeting ends, one man lingers near the doorway. His hands are stained from dyeing cloth, the purple smudges climbing up to his wrists. He tells you they've been warned to flee, but some refuse. If we run, he says, we abandon the city to lies. Better to stand, even if we burn. There's no irony in his voice. On your way out, you hear footsteps in the alley. For a heartbeat, you think the Praetorians have come, but it's just an old woman carrying a basket of figs. She gives you a look sharp enough to slice through cloth before moving on. In Rome, suspicion now hangs on anyone seen entering certain doorways. The next morning, the forum hosts an announcement so public it feels staged for the ages. A herald, flanked by soldiers, declares that those responsible for the great crime against the city will be punished in the arena. His voice doesn't tremble, but the way he pauses after each sentence suggests he knows exactly how much blood the crowd expects to see. It's an effective move. Rome has always loved a good spectacle, and the promise of one distracts from harder questions. Was the fire really the Christians' doing? Were they capable of such destruction? Or is the city simply desperate for a villain? You think of the young woman in the cellar, her careful reading of the scroll, and you doubt she could have lit so much as a torch without trembling. By afternoon, Guards patrol certain neighborhoods in tighter formation. They knock on doors, demand names, and drag out anyone accused, whether by evidence or by a neighbor's grudge. A baker on your street whispers that he turned in a man who owed him money, not because he believed him guilty, but because the debt had gone unpaid too long. In times like these, vengeance wears the mask of justice. One rumor you hear at the baths makes your stomach knot. It says that Nero has planned elaborate punishments, Christians sewn into animal skins and hunted by dogs. Others covered in pitch and set alight to serve as torches during imperial feasts. You tell yourself it's exaggerated, one of those grim flourishes Rome's storytellers love to add. Still, the image clings to you like smoke. In the evening, you wander past the Circus Maximus, its vast oval now quiet in the fading light. Workers are repairing sections damaged by the fire, but you can't help noticing that new seating is being added, perhaps to accommodate larger crowds for events that will be talked about for years. Rome's appetite for drama is endless, and Nero knows how to feed it. At a tavern nearby, a sailor tells you he's heard the emperor himself will attend the first round of executions. He says this with the same tone one might use to announce the arrival of a favorite chariot team. You sip your watered wine and say nothing. That night, as you walk home, the streets feel different. It's not just the emptiness, it's the way even the shadows seem cautious, as though they too might be questioned about their loyalties. Somewhere far off, you hear singing, not the rowdy kind that comes with drinking, but the measured, haunting cadence of a hymn. It's almost beautiful enough to make you forget, for a moment, the fate waiting for its singers. By now, the smell of charred timber has faded from Rome's air, replaced by something colder and less tangible, the scent of politics at work. You've been in the city long enough to recognize when the gears are turning behind closed doors, and lately you can almost hear them grinding. The trials have begun, though trial is too generous a word for what's happening. You watch one in the forum, squeezed among a crowd that seems more interested in gossip than justice. The accused stands before a magistrate, his tunic plain, his wrists bound with rope. He tries to speak in his own defense, but the jeers are louder than his voice. Evidence is thin, if you can call it evidence at all. The main proof is a neighbor's claim that he looked suspicious the night the fire began. In Rome, suspicion is a flexible currency, and right now, it's trading high. Nero's enemies see their opening. The Senate, which has always been a tangle of ambition and grudges, begins to buzz. Some senators openly question whether the Christians truly started the fire, careful to keep their voices low and their eyes darting for spies. Others, the more calculating sort, stay silent on the matter of guilt, but use the chaos to criticize Nero's leadership. Historians still argue whether these murmurs were genuine concern for justice or simply opportunism dressed in a toga. You overhear a sharp exchange in the portico of a basilica. Two men arguing whether the emperor's generosity after the fire was genuine aid or a calculated move to soften public opinion before unleashing his full political theater. One insists Nero is a protector of the people, citing the shelters and food he provided. The other counters that no true protector needs an enemy to burn for him. You pretend to be admiring a mosaic of Neptune nearby, but your ears are busy collecting their words. In the Subura, the city's poorest district, the atmosphere is different. Here, people don't have the luxury of Senate gossip. They care only that the rebuilding is slow and the bread distributions smaller than promised. Anger toward Nero bubbles more openly, though it's often disguised as complaints about the cost of olive oil or the shortage of wine. In Rome, political dissent often wears the mask of everyday frustration. One afternoon, you pass by the steps of the temple of Castor and Pollux and see a young orator practicing to a small group. His voice carries well, and though he never names Nero directly, his metaphors about a shepherd who burns the pasture to pen the flock leave little doubt. Someone in the crowd laughs too loudly, and a pair of praetorians drift closer. The group scatters before the soldier's shadow reaches them. Meanwhile, outside the city, trouble brews in the provinces. Letters arrive from governors hinting at unrest, emboldened perhaps by the rumors from Rome. One parchment you glimpse in a scribe's hands bears an urgent seal and speaks of disloyal murmurs in the east. The empire is vast, and news of Nero's handling of the firebrand, the brutal aftermath, travels faster than most realize. The court, of course, is another world entirely. In the corridors of the Palatine Hill, alliances shift with the subtlety of a chess match. One day, you hear that Tigellinus, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, has the emperor's ear and is steering him toward harsher crackdowns. The next, whispers suggest Poppaea, Nero's wife, is urging him to show mercy, though mercy in Rome is always measured by how it serves the one offering it. Amid all this maneuvering, the executions continue. You force yourself to watch one, hoping to understand the city's mood. It's at the Gardens of Nero, where a portion of the grounds has been opened to the public for the entertainment. The victims are paraded out, and as the sun sets, the torches are literally. These aren't torches. The sailor in the tavern was right. People, smeared with pitch, stand bound to poles, their faces illuminated by the fire that devours them. You expect the crowd to react with horror, but many cheer. Rome has always blurred the line between justice and spectacle, and here the two are indistinguishable. Still, in the faces of a few, you catch something else: disquiet, the kind that comes when a show lasts too long and the applause feels rehearsed. That night, lying awake, you realize the fire has become more than a disaster. It's a tool reshaping the city, yes, but also its loyalties, its fears, and its rulers' fortunes. For Nero's opponents, it's the perfect wedge. For his allies, it's a test of how far Rome can be bent without breaking. You think of the Christians, those who remain in hiding, and wonder if their quiet endurance will one day be remembered more than the accusations. But for now, memory belongs to whoever shouts the loudest. And in Nero's Rome, shouting isn't just allowed, it's encouraged, as long as you're shouting the right words. Rome has a way of folding disasters into its identity. Even as the embers fade, the memory of the fire clings not just in blackened stone and twisted iron, but in the way people walk through the city now. You notice it in the small hesitations, a shopkeeper glancing twice at his oil lamp before shuttering for the night, a mother shepherding her children away from any doorway where smoke drifts from a cooking pot. The Senate passes new building regulations, the kind that sound noble in decrees and feel oppressive in execution. Stone and brick, not wood, must be used for external walls. Streets must be wider, the alleys less cramped, and overhanging balconies banned. Historians still argue whether these laws were born of genuine concern for safety or merely a pretext to reshape Rome in Nero's vision. Either way, the result is the same: Rome's jagged organic sprawl begins to straighten under the weight of imperial design. You see demolition crews at work, tearing down what little the fire spared. To some, it's a relief. The old structures were a patchwork of repairs and risks. To others, it's salt in the wound, losing not just their homes to the flames, but the streets that once defined their lives. One man, his hair silvered by age, sits on the broken step of what was his wine shop. He tells you the fire destroyed his livelihood in hours, but it's the new improvements that have truly erased him. Not all the changes are grim. Open courtyards bloom where buildings once pressed shoulder to shoulder. Water from aqueducts runs more freely to public fountains, less hindered by the old tangle of private pipes. Some of the new forums have elegant colonnades, and the marble gleams as if to prove Rome's resilience. And yet the shine feels different, more polished, less lived in, like a stage set awaiting an audience. At the markets, you hear merchants using the fire as a marker of time. Before the fire and after the fire become shorthand for every conversation, whether about prices, births, or marriages. It's not unlike how you mark your own life with moments when everything shifted, personal fires, the kind no bucket can quench. You wander past the rebuilt Circus Maximus, its new stone seating promising to last centuries. But you remember the night it burned, the heat that made even the river seem unsafe. The grandeur here now feels both triumphant and slightly defensive, as if daring disaster to try again. Religion, too, has been shaped by the blaze. The temples rebuilt in the wake of the fire are grander, more heavily guarded. Priests speak with greater authority about omens, interpreting the disaster as both punishment and opportunity. A young augur tells you that the gods have burned away the city's imperfections. You re-tempted to ask if the gods plan to spare the rest of Rome's imperfections, but you hold your tongue. Sarcasm doesn't mix well with prophecy. The memory of the Christians lingers in quieter ways. Their persecution is still spoken of in taverns, though often with a cautious glance around. Some Romans, perhaps uneasy with what they witnessed, frame their discomfort as curiosity. They ask questions about this strange sect's beliefs, their refusal to honor the old gods. Others double down on the official line, calling them arsonists, as if repetition can make the accusation true. The fire has also sparked a strange sort of tourism. Visitors from other provinces come to see the city reborn, walking the rebuilt streets as if they were marvels rather than necessities. A cellar near the forum even carves little wooden models of the old city, flames painted along the rooftops, history turned into a trinket. You watch a boy hand one to his father, smiling as if gifting him a heroic tale rather than a memory of loss. Some nights, you stroll the Aventin Hill and look out over the city. From here, you can trace the fire's old path like a scar, the way the new stonework changes shade in the moonlight. Rome looks solid again, but you know its strength is as much theater as it is masonry. The politicians call this the Rome of tomorrow, but for those who lived through the fire, tomorrow will always be colored by that night's glow. The law may dictate the shape of the streets, but the people carry the true map, one drawn in ash and smoke. Night in Rome is quieter now, but it's the kind of quiet that remembers noise. You walk along a street paved in fresh stone, the moonlight silvering the smooth surface where once there was packed dirt and scattered refuse. The smell of the fire is gone, replaced by the temps of lime from the new mortar. Yet, every so often, a gust of wind will stir dust from some forgotten pile of rubble, and your mind will drag you back to that week when the city was more flame than stone. The Domus Aurea looms ahead. Nero's golden house isn't finished yet, but even in its incomplete state, it's staggering. Gold leaf glitters faintly on columns, and the walls are painted with delicate frescoes that will probably look scandalously indulgent to future generations. Right now, it's the clearest symbol of the city's shifted palace, born directly from the cleared heart of Rome. Historians still argue whether it was vanity or vision, but you can't ignore that it stands exactly where the fire burned hottest. Some Romans passed by with forced nonchalance, refusing to look at the construction as if that grants them moral victory. Others stop to stare openly, their faces a mix of awe and resentment. One old woman mutters that the fire burned away the city so the emperor could build his playground. She doesn't lower her voice. Perhaps she knows she's one of thousands thinking the same thing. Inside the markets, the bustle has returned, but it's slower, less frantic. Merchants seem more deliberate about how they store their goods, stacking amphorae farther from lamps, keeping textiles well away from cooking fires. A fishmonger jokes about selling only fireproof fish now, the kind that come with their own layer of protective slime. You almost laugh, but the humor lands with a strange weight, too much truth hiding behind the joke. You find yourself visiting the poorer districts more often. Here, rebuilding is still patchwork. Families live under patched awnings, their walls made of whatever timber they've scavenged. A young boy shows you a corner of his home that he swears is the same beam his father carried out of their old tenement, unburnt. Whether that's true or not, docen t materit the story that keeps the piece of wood valuable. Quirky traditions have sprouted in the wake of the fire. Some households now keep a jar of water near the front door at all times, calling it their guardian jar. Children dare each other to dip their fingers in it before bed, as if the act will grant them protection from bad dreams. Others place small bronze charms shaped like flames over their doors, a strange inversion of the danger, claiming it will keep uninvited fire away. The vigils walk their patrols with more authority now. They've gained a certain respect, or perhaps fear, after the fire proved their worth. Some carry longer hooks for tearing down burning structures. Others keep small flasks of vinegar to soak cloths for breathing in heavy smoke. You overhear two of them debating whether Rome should invest in some kind of permanent water pumps. One laughs at the idea. The other says maybe it's worth trying. Theater troupes, ever opportunistic, have begun performing plays that thinly disguise the fire's events. In one, a character clearly meant to be Nero sings a hauntingly bad song as his city burns in the background. The audience roars with laughter in public, but you catch the way some eyes dart toward the guards at the edge of the crowd. Humor in Rome is always a calculated risk. You take one last look at the partially finished Domus Aurea before heading home. It glows faintly in the moonlight, a golden wound stitched into the city's fabric. Maybe one day it will feel like just another palace, stripped of the story that birthed it, but not yet. Not while the memories of that night still walk these streets, just like you do. The year after the fire, Rome feels like a city caught between two heartbeats. By day, the noise of chisels and hammers drowns out the quieter thoughts. By night, those thoughts return, threading themselves through the narrow lanes and newly cut boulevards, whispering to anyone still awake. You walk those streets often, partly because you can't sleep, partly because the city feels more honest when it's dim and half empty. You pass a cluster of workers unloading marble blocks under torchlight. Their foreman swears they'll have the new baths finished before the next festival, though you suspect his optimism is more for morale than reality. Historians still argue whether Rome truly prospered in the years immediately after the fire, or simply learned to disguise its wounds with construction, dust, and imperial pageantry. The old neighborhoods are harder to find now. Whole blocks have been wiped from the map, their footprints erased under straighter streets and broader plazas. You try to recall where you once bought figs from a vendor with a crooked smile, but the spot is now an open courtyard with a fountain shaped like a dolphin. The water sparkles in the moonlight, and for a moment you almost believe the change is purely beautiful. Almost. People have adapted in strange ways. Families tell fire stories, like other people tell ghost stories, sitting in circles with the lamplight flickering on their faces. One man insists he saw a phoenix in the smoke, a real one, wings spread wide before vanishing into the night. A young woman claims she still hears the crackle of burning timber in her dreams, and each time she wakes, she checks her hair for sparks. And then there's Nero. His public image has become a mask worn too often it fits his face now. He appears in gleaming robes, speaks of unity and rebirth, and smiles as though the city itself is grateful. You catch sight of him once, riding in a gilded chariot down a rebuilt avenue, waving to a crowd that cheers because it's simpler than not cheering. His golden house gleams in the background, swallowing the stars. The Tiber flows on, as it always does, carrying the city's secrets downstream. Watching it, you realize that fires will come and go, emperors will rise and fall, and yet Rome will keep reshaping itself, like molten metal poured into a new mold. The fire was not the end, just one of the many moments when the city decided to rewrite its own story. The hammers are quieter now. The smell of mortar fades into the ordinary sense of bread baking, oil lamps burning, and figs ripening in the sun. You stand at the edge of the forum, feeling the stones still faintly warm from the day's heat. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The wind stirs, carrying the faintest echo of that long, bright night when everything changed. You close your eyes and let the city's pulse slow in your mind. The flames have burned themselves into history, but here, in this moment, Rome simply breathes. You breathe with it. The night deepens, and the noise fades into something softer, like the slow rhythm of a lullaby. Buildings stand where rubble once was. People laugh where grief once gathered, and the stars keep watch from above. Rest now. The city is safe enough for tonight. And now, let's let the fire fade completely, like the last embers drifting into ash. You've walked through the smoke, felt the heat on your skin, heard the shouts and the cracks of collapsing walls. You've smelled the mortar dust of rebuilding, traced the new streets that try to forget the old ones, and listened to the whispers that refuse to let go. But here, as the final light drains from the horizon, all of that begins to settle. Picture the city from far above, the rooftops dark against the silver thread of the Tiber. The air is cooler here, moving slowly through colonnades and empty plazas. The clamor of the day is gone. No hammers, no market calls, no speeches, just the hum of a place that knows it will still be here tomorrow. You wander one last time through those marble streets, the moon catching on polished columns, the shadows softening every edge. Every step feels slower now, like the city is walking with you, urging you to match its pace. Somewhere, a door creaks shut. Somewhere else, a late-night baker turns a loaf in the oven, the smell drifting warm and sweet through the dark. The golden house rests quietly too, its gold dimmed in the moonlight, just another building in the silence. The plazas, the fountains, the rebuilt homes, they're all part of the same gentle rhythm now. Even the scars of the fire, hidden under stone and plaster, seem to breathe easier. Let yourself follow that rhythm. Breathe in slowly, feeling the night air fill your lungs. Hold it a moment, then let it out, carrying away the last sharp edges of what you've seen. The streets in your mind grow softer, emptier, until they are only lines fading into the dark. The city, the fire, the emperor, they all drift further back, like lights receding down a long road. What's left is only stillness. You are safe. Rome is safe. And the night is deep enough to hold every restless thought until morning. Rest now. The story will be here when you wake. End of script. Sweet dreams.